I've been called upon to be recorded introducing my favorite member of Alcoholics Anonymous because she sleeps with me. And she's also the only person I ever knew that understood the significance of step 6 and 7 before she was 30 days sober. My wife, Carla R.
There we go. Hey, everybody. My name is Carla, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, honey. Oh, God. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Ali, for the invitation to come back and try this again. I last time we had some big technical difficulties and stuff, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity again to come back and talk about this. It's a very personal adventure, step 11, for me. And I think of my friend Howard Polans, a lot of our friends, Howard Polans, who used to say, wherever you see God pass, mark that spot and go sit in that window again. And for me, I've had lots of windows, and Alcoholics Anonymous may be the biggest and most significant window. And I literally fell, or porthole even for me. And then lots of, but I love my husband very much. And step 11 has helped me a great deal with this relationship. You know, Doug and I got together very much later in our sobriety. My sobriety date, by the way, is September 25th, 1987, just 3 short months after my husband. He likes you to know that. And but I just tell him that they're man months, so we're really even, but only half the room ever likes that joke. And but you know, step 11, it's important to me, and over the years, even more so. And my discipline, my practices change, my methods change, but the intent is the same, and to improve my conscious contact with this power I still can't define or comprehend. I get to experience. And you know, once in a while, I lived alone till I was 21 years sober. Well, I didn't have a relationship. My daughter was with me back and forth, but I didn't have a relationship till I was 21 years sober like this. And so living together can be kind of a challenge, you know, and step 11 helps me stay awake through the day, you know, and I picked this topic. There's a direct linkage between self-examination, prayer, and meditation, because I do a much better 11 when I'm doing 10, and I do a much better 10 when I'm doing 11. I have to be awake to watch for selfishness, self-seeking, and dishonesty born of fear. And I have to be, and I have to have those things in order. I have to be awake to those, so that when I'm practicing and continuing to improve this conscious contact with this power I can't define or comprehend, so that I don't begin mistaking the power that is not of me but works through me to be part of me, or start to, you know, have funny motives. I got to watch my motives with this, because even in Alcoholics Anonymous, the search for power, and in a lot of different ways, you know, how many sponsees do you have? How many commitments do you have? How many meetings have you started? How many, you know, where, you know, all of that kind of spiritual materialism, I've heard it called, it can happen here too. And so why? Because we're human beings, and that's the journey of the human condition. But when people say, oh, I read 86 through 88 every day, first of all, I want to know if you did them, because it's really different when I do those things rather than I just read them. Although I had to start by reading them. But what happened to pages 84 and 85? 84 and 85 lead me into, you know, into why I need it. And you know, just to let you know, I'm not perfect still after all these years. You know, I can walk into the kitchen at any given time, and Doug's committed some kind of kitchen felony, you know, and I just, you know, most days if I'm awake, I can, you know, I just, okay, clean it up. It's a banana peel upside down, or you know, crumbs, or some, you know, ridiculous thing like that. And I think, that's okay. I'll clean them up. La, la, la. And then other days, sometimes I forget and I'm not quite awake yet. I walk in and I see that and I think, well, son of a bitch. And only I say it out loud, and thank God, we're older and my husband is a little hard of hearing, just like I am. And he doesn't always have his hearing aids in. So he doesn't always hear me when I pop off like that. And this particular morning, I said that I out loud and pretty high volume. And I thought, oh, dang, I really wish I hadn't done that. And he said, honey, did you say something to me? I guess he'd been on the phone or he didn't have his hearing aids in or something. And I said, well, I was just wondering if you'd like a sandwich. And so, step 11 helps turn that 10 step right around, just woof, right in a moment. And thank God he didn't want a sandwich either. But, a lot of times these practices, first I need to backtrack a little bit because I know we have new people in here, I'm sure of it. And steps 1 through 9 really complete a circuit. They really helped me to come to trust the process. It taught me that I was going to be uncomfortable, but that progress was going to happen. And way back in the last promise in the second step at the end of the chapter to the agnostics, it says, when we drew near, he disclosed himself to us. And I didn't know it at the time, but this was a hint of things to come, that what was to come next was the beginning of seeing that there was stuff in the way of a better relationship with this power that I knew existed. I'd had experiences with since I was a small child. I didn't deny the existence of God, but after alcohol intervened in my life, any experience or that I had with this power had long become a distant memory, a belief, but no longer an experience, and it got in the way. And what happened after that promise in the second step, which to me is the second step, just really means maybe. If you can just say, maybe this will work, it's a simple place to start, and let's see where that goes. And then there was some clearing out to do. Then you taught me that it's self that was in the way. And in a very general way, in the third step, in pages 60 to 63 in the big book, it talks about how self manifests in me due to fear. It starts talking about fear right away. I become selfish because I'm afraid. I become dishonest because I'm afraid. I become self-seeking because I'm afraid. Afraid of what? Not getting or losing something I think I shouldn't lose. And in that becomes the drama, right? And then in the fourth step, you taught me about mapping it out and how that stuff had shown up in me in the past. And in the 10th step, I continue to watch for these things to see how they're manifesting in the now, and many times even preemptively. And I can see it coming. I can feel that that energy rising in my solar plexus, where I want to be selfish. I want to say something. I want to do this. I want to and the process of steps 10 and 11 help me see it coming. And a lot of times I get to avoid a mess. The joke I told earlier, notwithstanding, and sometimes sometimes we, the stakes are high in a relationship, in a husband and wife relationship, or anywhere we're close, in that close proximity, partner. It's the stakes are high, and so I really have to watch. But we do pretty good. We have a lot of fun. So that's really, if I say nothing else about that, the direct linkage is among self-examination, meditation, and prayer is, man, don't leave out that 10th step. And for me, the 10th step is 1 through 9 all over again. I'm watching, I'm continuing to watch. I see what's in the way, continue to allow in steps 6 and 7, allow to recognize and self as it's coming up, recognize how it wants to manifest, and the surrender. And I know that a lot of times we talk about a first and a second surrender, and I don't know about you, but I have a continued surrender. I live in a continued surrender. It's always, and step 11 just helps me with the observation of that. I don't have to take this so personally. And there are so many paradoxes and in the world of spirituality, or the realm of spirituality, that I almost have to have a continued loosening of my grip on anything I think I know at all, because as soon as I make a statement that I'm sure of, somebody else is going to have, yeah, but there's going to be a small opening into a new belief, and it's my beliefs. And God, and I just had one more reckoning today of, I got a lot of opinions. I got a really lot of opinions. As hard as I work, to keep an open mind, I got a lot of opinions, and steps 10 and 11 help me with that. I can have them, but I've got to allow that little bit of breathing room, that, ventilator, that allowance for new ideas to come through. And they may not always be right. I don't want to be just, wishy-washy and blown by the wind and every new idea that comes along, but I like to be able to consider them without practicing contempt prior to investigation, which, when I live in fear, and I haven't had to live in that kind of darkness for a long time, but when I lived in fear, and I've done that in sobriety too, I had to become so rigid and so almost discompassionate, I know we all like to say, well, I like to tell you the truth. And I know that, but we don't like to hear it much. I like to be the friend that tells you the truth, but I don't think any of us really like to hear it. And so, I got, what I've learned though over time is that there are two sides of the coin. And if I don't like it coming at me, I better figure out a way, to say things in a way that I could digest them. Otherwise they just fall on deaf ears and I hurt people. And all of that comes from fear, even when I'm under the guise of trying to help somebody, which is the worst, the absolute worst for me in my experience. So yeah, back to the promise of when we drew near, he disclosed himself to us. And when I was new, listen, I'm here because I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop drinking, and I couldn't stop starting up drinking again, and I didn't even want to do that for a long time. And then when I started becoming scared of my own drinking at about 28, 29 years old, I got sober when I was 29. When I started doing that scary drinking where even I was afraid, I couldn't tell anybody because the people around me had been scared of my drinking for a lot longer than I had been, and so you can't tell people like that because then they want you to quit, and I just didn't want to have that discussion yet. And I lived in violent circumstances and I so wanted to be, I could hear my spirit crying so often in those times that even in those drinking and using times, I knew, but I couldn't be that. I couldn't be it. I had to get sober in order to have this practice, to be able to even consider having a relationship with a power greater than myself, to have a spiritual awakening sufficient to bring about a human experience, really, is what I've got. And I don't know about you, but I didn't know how to walk on the earth. I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know how to really interact. And that's not how I was born. When I was a kid, I was active in school. I was a new kid on the block a lot, and I found my way in, and I was social, and it wasn't like I didn't get scared, but there were dark things happening at home, and, molestation and all of that kind of stuff. But I was pretty resilient for a long time. But when alcohol came along, I didn't have to work so hard. Alcohol became my spirituality. It really was a great counterfeit for me. It became my growing up muscle. It made me feel like I was doing emotional work I wasn't really doing, but it was the great cheat sheet, and it became the thing that made me feel buffered from you and the thing that made me feel connected to you all at the same time. Why wouldn't I do that? And then, so in that, I went down a path, and, I'm not going to blame my whole being on my alcoholism. I couldn't possibly do that because I have the traits of a human being. I have faults and I make mistakes, but but certainly where alcohol took me was not on my list of things to do. When I was in elementary school, you know, I wanted to be the first woman to run a 4-minute mile and the first woman Major League Baseball player and the first woman president, you know, and by the time I was 14, I was turning tricks in an area called North Beach in the the city of San Francisco. And so, you know, my life had taken a big left turn and ended up locked up. And I wondered about my, you know, was I crazy? I ended up in a mental hospital for a year. And, you know, a lot of those people were outright mental defectives and full flight from reality and completely maladjusted to life, but they weren't alcoholics. And I look a lot like them. I looked a lot like them, and I was heavily medicated during those years and locked up most of my adolescent life, and I couldn't find my way. And I started learning to meditate when I was 17, and I had taken a whole lot of acid over my time, you know, and something about that had, you know, I just needed to find a new way. And so I learned to meditate when I was 17, and it really, you know, it helped a lot, although I couldn't stop drinking. And it just introduced me to sort of a place where I wanted to go someday. So I wasn't unfamiliar with these things, but I couldn't stop drinking. And I'm one of those people who I really, and I have to say this, I really don't like to give the phenomenon of craving short shrift, because I want to I like to remind myself anyway, if nobody else, that I will never be so spiritually fit that I can take a drink of alcohol safely in any form at all, not cough medicine form or food form. And I don't know who puts food in their alcohol anyway, but some people do, you know, and or mouthwash form, you know. So I'm the person who, when I go to an Italian restaurant, I'm saying, hey, or any restaurant, hey, is there, you know, wine in the spaghetti sauce? That, you know, those familiar dishes that I know sometimes people, they just do it and they see no harm in it. And for some people, it's not harmful. But I ask, and because I believe in the phenomenon of craving, I needed that piece of information, because no matter how spiritually fit I get, I still can't go home after a Sunday sermon and have a glass of wine at the picnic, you know. So I need to know these things. That's a piece of self-knowledge that was helpful to me. That alone wouldn't have kept me sober, though. But so I've gone through the, you know, the first 9 steps. And incidentally, when I was new, I was told to also practice the instructions on pages 84 through 88 in the big book. And then I also went to a 12 and 12 study when I was new too, for the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of my life, maybe the first 10. But so you know, I like both books, and I always find it interesting for the people, the naysayers on the 12 and 12, like, you know, Bill wrote that during a time of deep, dark depression. He had the world, almost literally the world of Alcoholics Anonymous on his shoulders. And he had been homeless, you know, in his first couple of years, after his first couple of years of sobriety, he had homeless for 2 years. And, you know, if he had said, well, I didn't get sober for this, you know, where would we be? And he walked through all that darkness, and he wrote the 12 and 12 to amplify what we'd learned in the big book. And so I don't know anybody who was more aware of and tried more to surrender his defects of character than Bill Wilson, at least what I've read of him. And, you know, the talks that the recordings of his talks I've heard him give. So which book was possibly more divinely inspired, the one that he wrote when he was 3 or 4 years sober, or the one that he wrote when he was 15 years sober, applying the stuff that he learned when he was new, you know, like which one is better? And so, you know, it's not always the big, you know, bazoo experiences that people share with me when they've been sober a while. It's sometimes, how'd you walk through that? Tell me how you walk through that darkness. Tell me about that, you know, because we come in here, and I know certainly for me, my sobriety was pretty front loaded with some trouble that I brought, certainly wreckage of my past, and stuff that, you know, the kookiness of my presence. But also things happen, you know, my daughter needed treatment. She was 11 years old and she was in big trouble. When I was 5 years sober, I was raped by an intruder in my apartment. And, you know, while that experience was not new to me, that had happened out on the street before, but now I'm 5 years sober. And I didn't consciously think this, but but I kind of, wondered, God, 12 golden steps here, like what's happening? There's a dude standing over my bed with a knife and he's tying me up, and like, wow. And so if anything, these steps, they don't protect me from life. They give me a foundation on which to stand so I can navigate, so I can walk through it, so I can experience it and allow it not to bypass it or shut down through it, but to live it so that I can have the compassion necessary to help the next person coming along. And I have had that happen. People I didn't even know calling me from places I hadn't even heard about and doing this work for the same kind of incidents that happen. And we all have those. But so when it gets dark and those questions came up about me, I had lived that life before, and now I'm sober and I've done all of this work as far as I know. And at 5 years sober, I'm questioning again. But what I started to say was that I was taught to, and very encouraged to continue to clean up. It says in step 10 in the big book that as we cleaned up the past, we practice these, I'm paraphrasing, but we do this stuff, we continue to watch for selfishness. Why not start now learning how to do that and clean up the dust of the presence while we're cleaning up the past? So and I really liked step 11 anyway. I've always been fascinated with the mystery, not infatuated, but fascinated with the mystery that I call God these days. I love the realm of the spirit and the I know that there's a God because it answers questions I don't always ask out loud. I don't even know those questions need asking, and yet something will come to me and it's something I can see. I can't always explain it, but it will happen for you too, because see, I want to say this too. I wouldn't be here if I had to just watch you have an experience. I would have been gone a long time ago if I would have had to just sit and listen to how great this is for you, which is the beauty. Our founders didn't say, hey, if you take these steps, then someday maybe you'll be able to call somebody and they'll tell you that they have a sister who had a brother-in-law who had a spiritual experience. They didn't say that. They said, if you do this, you get what we got. And yet, the instructions are very, very plain. They're there in the book, but the experience of it looks different on all of us. And that's the adventure. And what I'm really fascinated with, and I suspect that everybody else is too, which is why we skip over 84 and 85. Like, who wants to see where I'm selfish or self-seeking or, I like, or looking to be the queen of the ball. Incidentally, I was told that early on that, and I know we've all heard it before, that if you're looking to be the cool kid, looking to be the gang leader in Alcoholics Anonymous is like trying to sit at the cool kids bench in the mental hospital. Like what are we really doing here? Like, the best feeling I know of, which is the essence of steps 6 and 7 for me, that brings it to me brings me to it, is that feeling of being right-sized. And I know when I'm right-sized, when I'm feeling part of, when I'm not looking to compete with you, when I'm happy and joyous in your success, when I'm walking shoulder to shoulder with you. And if I'm sharing with you what you might try to do, I'm not sharing it with you as an authoritarian. I'm sharing it with you out of compassion that, hey, maybe it would help if you did that. It certainly helped me. But I have certainly gotten into that authoritarian kind of thing, and step 11 has helped me with that. Step 10, very much so. What is it I'm looking to do? What's my motive here? And these steps are so rich, even in our literature. It over and over we hear about this alcoholic thinking thing, and as far as I'm concerned, alcoholic thinking is when the obsession is maybe has been pricked open again, and for me it hasn't returned since I was 9 months sober. I was absolutely obsessed with the idea of that someday I was going to need to pick up a drink of alcohol till I was in the middle of making my amends to my family. And then somewhere along the line, it stopped. That obsession to drink alcohol, that's alcoholic thinking, is when I think that I need a drink to solve any of this. Beyond that, it says that our book says that, and it's been my experience, that the continued practice of these principles has expelled the obsession to drink. And then I don't have to worry about that phenomenon of craving. I don't have to worry about picking up that first one. I don't have to worry about the second one happening because I'm not anywhere near the first one. I'm not, after 33 years of sobriety, not drinking. I'm not drinking. Like, we're not here not drinking. You gave me something else to do. You gave me a sufficient substitute. You gave me this. You said, do this instead. And as uncomfortable as I was, I don't know why I keep going back to the beginning, but as uncomfortable as I was with doing this, I came to trust it. And if you're new, I want to, it's get comfortable with being uncomfortable and just try this stuff and just put off, and again, for me, that obsession to drink alcohol, Calvin Klein made billions on the word obsession. So obsession is not exclusive to alcoholism. Okay. We got to, stop this self-centeredness. Like, we learn a word and then we own it, like we made it up. No, obsession to drink alcohol, that's alcoholism, is when I can't think of anything else. And then I can't do anything else. Then I believe that belief that only a drink is going to solve it. And somehow the process of these steps, it shattered that. It shattered it. And for me, it hasn't returned, but I will say that there's a woman who has many years of sobriety now, who talked of her obsession returning when she was about 29 years sober or so. And the obsession to drink alcohol returned, but also being sane, sanity had returned in the promise of the 10th step. Sanity had returned, and she just knew that she needed to keep herself safe. So while this hideous obsession to drink alcohol was in her, she knew what she needed to do to keep herself safe. It wasn't that she wasn't sponsoring or showing up or anything. She was doing it all. And yet this thing in her mind kept happening, and she just had to keep herself safe until it passed. So I will use that as an exception. It wasn't my experience, but I believe it can happen. But everywhere else it talks about thinking in steps 10 and 11. And then in other writings that Bill has written, like I want to give a shout out to the collection of writings in the book, The Language of the Heart, and his article on emotional sobriety, the continued observance of these faulty dependencies that we come to, this sense of power and certainty and coming through other people, dependence on other people and things, and what I think I need in order to be okay, besides this power, this inner resource that lives in me, if I'll just tap into it. And it takes practice. It just takes practice. And I know nobody who does this perfectly. I think when I'm doing it perfectly, they'll be eulogizing me. It's going to be done. I'll be done with this particular round, And how long does it take? There's a spiritual teacher that I love listening to, and he talks of a story. I don't think it's his story. I think he was just telling it, but he says, how long have we been doing this self-examination and this prayer and meditation? How long have we been doing this? And the teacher said every 100 years, a bird flies over a 100 by 100 mile square, 100 square mile mountain range, and the bird's got a scarf in his beak, and as long as it takes for that scarf to brush over the mountains every 100 years, that's how long we've been doing this. And so, just welcome to the journey, settle in, buckle up, because it's going to take a while, right? And in that, I must be talking about that now because I miss it when I stop having fun. And there have been times in my sobriety where I just became no fun at all. After that rape thing, I walk through it like a champ, and not anything to do with me, but there was power through this, and I believed, and I had support, and nobody ever said, well, what were you wearing, or what were you doing? They didn't say any of that. I had all the help I need, and I knew at 5 years of sobriety I could call the police, and it was for me to forgive this guy, and it was for me to testify on this. And all of this comes from the continued practice of these principles and staying awake in the 11th step. And a couple of years after that, I thought, I met this man, and I wasn't ready, but I still, he was the exact opposite of somebody I thought that I should. You hear in AA that the guy or the person you're your partner, the guy, for me, your partner, whoever it is you're supposed to be with, it should be the exact opposite of anybody you've ever been looking for. That's what I heard him say. And so he was. I couldn't stand him, really. I always felt like he was lying to me, and he was. And yet, I think he's the right one. And he became my business partner at the same time. And long story short, I ended up bankrupt at 10 years sober, and just really pissed, just really mad, like, I don't get this thing. I've been trying, and, my motives have been good as far as I know. And, I had just really become that head of household who was going to make up for lost time. And I lost all sense of perspective, and work became the power, and money became the goal. And I fell flat. But the idea that I got was that perhaps God needed me to be more aware of what was going on, and to work harder, and to that maybe I hadn't been doing my job, and so I stopped reading any outside literature outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. I stopped with any of the fluffy stuff. I stopped with the love and the compassion stuff. I thought that's where I had let this in. I had let it in too much. I got to shut down. And I don't know if you've ever done this in sobriety, but for me, I didn't even know I was doing it. And it's taken me a while to even get this far with the words of it. But I shut down. I just started to shut down. And I thought, nothing but the big book. We're not doing anything but the big book. And let me tell you something, that'll make you, I even became a compliance officer in an investment firm. I mean, it made me a great worker, but a terrible friend and an awful sponsor. In fact, I was sitting next to my boss one time, and I was talking to a sponsee and trying to help him, and I was saying something that was rough. I just thought blunt's the best. I took pride in making people I talked to on the phone in business cry. And I thought, yeah. And deep down inside, I know something's wrong with it, but I can't get at it. I can't get at it because I'm scared, because the fear in there is so deep. I don't even know what it's called. And so I became rigid, and I had sponsees, but man, and they were like, I don't want to call her, you call her, I love her, but I don't want to talk to her, and just rigid. And, and well, obviously it doesn't work. And I remember I was sitting in, I want to talk around this too. I hope I don't forget to say, to talk about the flavor of this, but I was sitting in a meeting one night in my big home group meeting, and I don't know how long sober I was, maybe 16 or 17 years sober by that time. And the leader started to talk. And as the leader opened the meeting, I just cried. I just broke down and cried. And the guy next to me, I thought was going to have a coronary. He didn't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do. I just cried. I was so tired. It's so exhausting. My friend Michaeline talks about it's just exhausting trying to hold up the world, trying to do it yourself. It's just exhausting. And here's where God answers questions that I don't ask out loud. And I want to tell you, that I never stopped praying or meditating during this time. I just stopped reading all the fluffy literature, the stuff that made me feel good and hopeful and anything like that. It just had to be all work, and what are you doing? And thank God I'd been praying and meditating, and somewhere along the line, I had always done something physical. And I know that this is not a cure for alcoholism, but for me, I'm a physical person. And for some reason, God installed this wonderful system of serotonin and dopamine and all of these things that happen naturally. Really, they're naturally occurring that we, really kind of waste the crap out of. But I had been regaining some of that, exercising. These things came to me in sobriety. I didn't make them up, and the gym, and then rollerblading. Rollerblading can be very zen. It's it's just me on the beach with the dolphins on the strand. Early morning. Here comes a curb. You don't argue with the curb. The curb exists. And then eventually getting attracted to the dolphins. And so I became a surfer for a while, actually a faller, but I was trying. And surfing was the most beautiful medium for life, beautiful analogy for life, because the medium is always moving. You're always adjusting your balance when you're surfing, when you're out there, and you have to be in the moment. You can't be anywhere else. And so while I wasn't reading any of that fluffy literature, God found a way in. There's another vent, another portal, and it's very personal. One of my windows, and until I could come back and the other way. And then I changed from surfing. And now after this incident at the synagogue, I had to stop surfing because I'd hurt myself, and it was time to do something else. And I found myself in an Arthur Murray dance studio taking a free rumba lesson. And I know how that sounds to some people, and especially if you're in the place where I was. I didn't know. I had no idea. God answers questions I don't ask out loud. I didn't even know it needed asking. And I went into this free rumba lesson, and I was there, and I'm in the middle of this lesson with this beautiful teacher. He's from Haiti, and he just was wonderful. And we're in the middle of the lesson, and he said, you can't be stiff and rigid when you're doing the rumba. You can't. And yet there I am, going to do it perfectly. And he stopped in the middle. He said, "Oh my God, Carla," he said, "do not try to dance like a good girl. I don't think they will believe you anyway." And that's a true story. And then he said, something else. That was a 6-year journey. I had no idea about what allowing people into this space and this proximity physically to me was going to do. I had no idea what I had done. I didn't know that. I didn't understand the shutdown, and nobody could have gotten it. And if you had said, "What's the matter, Carla?" I couldn't have told you. And so here it had to happen. And I love that I believe it was St. John the Baptist that said, "Preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words," but apparently there were no words this time. And this guy, one time we were in this competition, because I'm going to find a way to have be in a competition. It was in the aftermath of it. And I went to my lesson, and he stood there took the whole 45-minute lesson to say, "If you don't start having some fun with this, you're going to quit." And I can't think of a better theme or phrase for life, for just living. If you don't start having fun with this, you're going to quit. And see, I always got to go back, because it is not my nature to be down and drawn and depressed. I can suffer those, but it's, I like to love. I'm an introverted extrovert, or an extroverted introvert. I like both, there's nothing wrong with either one. I just like both. I know when it's time for me to be alone, and I don't think isolation, I don't think solitude is isolation necessarily. And yet I like to be with people a lot of the time. I love the interaction. Sponsorship might be my favorite thing. But if I didn't learn how to have some fun, to remember, it was a remembering, that's what we do. And I was told too, and I don't know if this is true, but it seems to be, as I go along, that you'll probably hear everything you need to hear in Alcoholics Anonymous in your first 30 days. And we'll spend the rest of our lives remembering these and having them come to light. And so, what I learned with that was, to be in physical proximity. And it was a reminder then again, when I wasn't, when I just stood in frame and held and allowed the leader to take his part. And I just, and I didn't get upset about the steps I just took, and I didn't stay worried about the steps I was about to take. I never knew the pattern we were going to continue until it was over. And in between, I got to experience the absolute joy of right now, right here, right now, where the God is, right here, right now. And so it began again. Then that portal was opened again, and I began to take deep dives. I'm not just a little like blurb reader in the morning. I take deep dives into traditions, spiritual traditions of all kinds. I love to find the connection of them. At the bottom of them, I find love and service. And you know what I find gets in the way, in my opinion, is pomp, worship of other things, the search for power, authority, all of those things. It gets in the way, and it can happen here too. And it's not that that's not even that it's not supposed to, it's that I need to be observant when it does, if that's what's happening. You know, our friend Ralph, he says, we got to grow God, shrink Ralph, you know, that, and that applies to me. And that's the search in this. And so seeking this out in the 11th step in the way, and it allowed, I got 3 different thoughts going. The practice of this step, first of all, meditation. The first thing I get most of the time when I talk to anybody about it who's new is like, well, what else you got? That's the thing they say, what else you got? Because, you know, I can't sit, I'm not, you know, and for me, saying that my head's too busy to meditate is like saying my floor's too dirty to sweep it. I got to start somewhere. And after a while, I didn't like those thoughts that were all running through my head. And then after a while, I started to learn that they're not even my thoughts, and that I don't have to reach for every single one that passes by. And like rust through a faucet, I sit and just allow. And then what happens if I do that in the world? Just allow. Wow, what would that be like if I stopped saying, if only you would do it this way, if only they would do it that way, if only they'd stop saying, if only this, if only that. And, you know, first of all, that stops. And there was a practice that I use intermittently, because I'm not an expert at it, but it's a practice called sending and taking. And I know that a lot of times we say, well, breathe in the God and breathe out the yuck. But this is about holding each other. This is about community. This is about sending and taking, breathing in first I start with me, breathing in my pain, breathing in my anxiety, breathing in my fear, breathing out love, breathing out peace, breathing out joy, breathing out and good. And then I go to my husband and breathe in his pain, breathe in his fear, breathe in his anxiety, breathe out love, breathe out compassion, breathe out service. And then I go to my neighbor and then enlarge that out into my neighborhood, out into the community, out into the global community, bit by bit. And then, and I like that one too. It's done. It's helped me a lot, but I've come to a point where I need to get some help with that. And I know that that'll come when it's time. So anyway, every morning I wake up and I say, thank you. My feet hit the floor and I say, thank you. And I ask God, part of my prayer is just the simple prayer in the big book where it says, asking God that my thinking be divorced from self-pitying, self-seeking motives. And I started to say this earlier, but you know, our thinking does improve. If I make a mistake in my life today, it's not because I'm an alcoholic. It's because I just, you know, I made a mistake. It doesn't mean I'm working a bad program. It doesn't mean, you know, or whatever my experience is, this stuff just gets me ready it makes room for all of the experience in my life. When I pray and I meditate it just gets me ready to be a container, a vessel to hold it all. And all these years later, you know, sometimes there's a lot of pain, there's grief, that people die, stuff happens. You know, I watched my brother pass away when I was 13 years sober. I was sharing at a meeting the night they took him off life support. He was a meth addict, and he wasn't, and his heart literally disintegrated in his chest. And that was the second child my mother had to bury. And yet in sobriety, not only was I able to walk through it myself, but to go up and be helpful to my mother as she buried a second child. And so what this practice does is it makes room in me to allow life to happen. Richard Rohr has a friend named Paula Darcy who says, God comes to us disguised as our lives. And that's what this is, you know, that I've had a spiritual experience sufficient to bring about a human experience. And that's what I want. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. I have thought about living in a cave, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure that, you know, if you're doing that and that's your God's work, that is, but I don't believe that was for me to do. And, you know, to steal a line from a movie, you know, as cheesy as you know, as cheap as that can be, I'm going to do it anyway, because it's a good line. And that God speaks through me as me. God lives through me as me. And each of us is an expression of this power that I still can't define or comprehend, perfectly imperfect. And I'm going to tell this story, and I think I'm running, I started my thing late, so I'm probably running out of time a little bit, but is it okay if I indulge? It's just one more story. I know it was a little scattered, but there's a book, I know a lot of you have heard of it, called Spirituality of Imperfection, written by Ernie Kurtz and his friend Catherine Ketchum. And there's a story in it about a bishop who comes to visit a primitive island, and he and his big ship, they all, you know, they're there to, you know, to Christianize it, to their missionaries. And they get off on the island, and then these three natives come up to him, and they're so excited, and they say, oh, Bishop, we're so glad to see you. We Christians. And the bishop says, oh, really, are you? And they say, yes. And he says, well, tell me, do you know the Lord's Prayer? And they said, oh, no, that's not the prayer we say. They say, he says, well, what prayer do you say? And they said, oh, we say, we are three, you are three, have mercy on us. And the bishop was appalled. He says, oh, for God's sake, you know, he probably didn't say that, but he said, so he taught him, he spent the whole time there teaching them how to say the Lord's Prayer just perfectly, you know, so they had it down by the time it was time for the bishop to leave. And so the bishop goes away feeling pretty prideful and, you know, like he's done something good, which, okay, great. And he leaves for a long time. And then a few years later, his ship is passing the island, and then they cross his mind. You know, he's like, oh, yeah, I remember them. That's pretty good. And then he looks across the water, and he sees three lights walking toward him and coming at him. And he's like, what? And everybody on the ship is, what are those? And so as the lights get closer, he sees these three natives are walking across the water to the ship. And then so they lower the lifeboat and they pull the guys up, and the bishop said, oh my God. And the how are you? And the guys said, oh, Bishop, please forgive us. We've forgotten the Lord's Prayer. We get started and then we just can't remember what the words are. And the bishop said, oh yeah, listen, you say we are three, you are three, have mercy on us. Good enough, you know? So my point of that whole thing is whatever method works for you is very personal. If it's working, be honest about whether or not it's working. There's some really specific suggestions in the big book, pages 84 through 88, that talk of steps 10 and 11. And you know how I feel about those. And then, you know, each method has brought me to the next, and it didn't make the last one wrong. It just meant it brought me to this one. And this is the one I'm doing now. So anyway, I can't wait for questions. I really like questions too. So thanks so much for listening and for having me. Thanks.